Okay. I'll present my screen now para sa third topic.
Okay. Ano?
So, good afternoon guys. Again, our third topic is all about working capital management. So, in working capital management, it is concerned with the problems that arise in attempting to manage the current assets, the current liabilities, and the interrelations that exist between them. So, pag sinabi kasing working capital class, in a layman's term, ito yung mga importanteng factor sa financial statement natin. Bakit? Kasi sila yung lagi nating ginagamit or ito yung nagpapatakbo ng operation ng ating business. So, kasama dito yung current assets, current liabilities, okay, and kasama din dito yung mga liquidity ratio na ginamit natin last time. So, ang mga examples nito is it easily converted with cash in 1 year pag sinabi natin current assets. So, cash, marketable securities, accounts receivable, and inventory yung mga example nito. Pag current liabilities naman, ito yung mga accounts payable, bills payable, bank overdraft, and outstanding expenses. So, this one, we need to pay this in an ordinary course of business within a year. So, pag lumagpas na siya ng 1 year, hindi na siya current. Okay? Non-current na siya. So, objective natin dito is we need to have a goal of working capital management that is to manage the firm's current assets and liabilities in such a way that a satisfactory level of working capital is maintained. So, kailangan nami-measure natin or na-analyze natin yung working capital management natin at namomonitor natin yan daily if ever na may business tayo. Dahil this is the main theme of the theory of the working capital management, the interaction between the current assets and the current liabilities. So, ang concepts natin dito, we have the gross and the net. So, gross working capital, it means the total current of assets. Net working capital can be defined in two ways. The difference between current assets and current liabilities. So, pinag-aralan natin yan sa ratio kanina. And the portion of current assets which is financed with long-term funds. So, we have also to determine the financing mix. So, there are two sources from the funds, which is the current assets financing. We have short-term and long-term sources. Pag sinabing short-term, these are the current liabilities. And ang long-term sources natin is the share capital, long-term borrowings. Ito na kapag nag-exceed na tayo sa 1 year na payment period. And internally generated resources like retained earnings and etc. So, here in the operating cycle and working capital needs, may mga requirement tayo dito, class. Number 1 is it may be defined as the time duration starting from the procurement of goods or raw materials and ending with the sales realization. So, sabi ko nga, diba, this working capital management is needed for the operations of the company. So, from the procurement of goods, ibig sabihin, sa ano pa lang, sa pagkuha pa lang ng mga raw materials, 'di ba? Hanggang sa ma-realize yung sales, ginagamit natin tong mga methods na to for our working capital. And then the length and nature of the operating cycle may differ from one another. And also the procurement of raw materials and services, conversion of raw materials into work in progress, and the conversion of work in progress into finished goods, sales of finished goods, and the conversion of receivables into cash. So, this is the operating cycle of a typical company. So, we have the purchase resources until we receive the sales, which is we should receive cash from our product. And this is the inventory conversion period, yung pinag-aralan natin. So, average inventory cost of sales over 365 naman. kanina sa accounts receivable turnover, ang ginagamit natin this is 360, while the inventory, it's 365. Okay? Take note of that. So, we have also the cash conversion cycle, which is operating cycle minus payables deferral periods, and payable deferral periods, which is the accounts payable plus salaries and etc. Pag sinabi kasing payables deferral period, may certain period lang tayo na inaalat. Hindi talaga siya totally na araw-araw na babawas sa ating account, pero naka-budget na siya. So, these are the salaries, 'di ba? So, kailangan, okay, itong mga ito is i-divide natin sa 365 days. And what are the determinants of working capital requirement? Number 1 is general nature of business, production cycle, business cycle fluctuation, production policy, credit policy, growth and expansion, profit level, level of taxes, dividend policy, depreciation policy, price level changes, and operating efficiency. So, ito yung mga mini-measure natin, guys. Okay? Para ma-determine natin yung working capital requirement natin. So, in policy and management, so the working capital management includes and refers to the procedures and policies required to manage the working capital. So, there are 3 types of working capital. Number 1 is moderate working capital capacity, conservative, and the aggressive type. So, ang initial kasi, guys, na policy, ang ideal policy is conservative. 'Di ba? Kasi yun yung nasa theory natin ng paggawa ng financial statement. So, these policies describe the relationship between the sales level and the level of current assets. So, this is the graph of the 3 alternative working capital investment policies. As you can see, medyo parallel naman siya. Mabalik. And, we also need to learn the liquidity versus the profitability. So, it's a risk-return trade-off. So, in working capital policy, it needs to maintain and provide sufficient liquidity to the firm. And having a large net working capital may reduce the liquidity risk faced by the firm. So, yan o. Kapag malaki kasing working capital mo, ibig sabihin, mas liquid yung company mo. Yun lang yung ibig sabihin yan. And we have also, the next slide, types of working capital needed. So, we have the permanent working capital and temporary working capital. So, pag permanent working capital, guys, may minimum level of working capital sila. So, kapag, when I work, no, in the company, everyday talaga minomonitor yung cash na available. Dapat may minimum. Dapat hindi bumaba. Kasi if bumaba siya, ayun, nagkakaroon kasi ng mga charges lalo na sa bank. If ever na magte-transfer ka, tapos hindi pala enough yung cash, may mga specific na fees kang babayaran doon, 'di ba? And syempre, yung every time na nag-i-initiate ka kasi ng payment sa mga international bank, may charge din siya na required. So, kailangan if maraming transaction yung business, it's very advantage na i-monitor lagi yung ating working capital. Kasi if na-maintain natin na at a certain level na may minimum working capital requirement yon, maayos yung yung business requirement natin. And then yung temporary working capital naman, over and above the permanent working capital, the firm will also require additional working capital in order to meet the requirements arising out of the fluctuation in the sales volume. So ito, mga pang-emergency siya. Kung mapapansin nyo sa income statement, no, palaging may sa isang malaking company, may naka-reserve sila. Okay? Na palaging nandun lang yung yung amount na yun, tas hindi yun nadadagdagan, hindi rin nababawasan, hindi nagagalaw. Kasi it's an indication na yung company na yun is may temporary working capital. Dahil that's an emergency fund if ever na nag-fluctuate dun sa mga analysis natin or may nangyaring masama sa economy. So, may ano sila, may buffer.
Learn from experience.
So, next. Yan. So, difference between the permanent and temporary working capital. So, this is the permanent working capital as you can see. Diba? As in, ito yung sinasabi ko na every fiscal year, ganun lang ng ganun yung nasa working capital. It's either $60,000, $60,000, $60,000, $60,000. For temporary working capital, it fluctuates over time depending on the situation, but it cannot go below the permanent working capital. So that's the difference between the temporary working capital and permanent working capital. So next is the variable working capital. Meron din namang permanent working capital na nag-i-increase through time, but the increase is relevantly fixed. So, nakikita nyo? Diba? Nag-i-increase siya to a certain percentage. While the variable working capital, it varies, but hindi pa rin dapat talaga lumagpas, okay? Or mag-below dun sa permanent working capital line. Okay, next slide. So, approaches to determine an appropriate financing mix. So, we have hedging approach. It's also called the matching approach. Ito yung ginagamit ng mga multinational company, no? Kasi they need to match the situation or the economy, okay, in terms of the working capital. With the conservative approach, ano siya, fixed and stagnant. Aggressive approach, ito naman, sobra-sobra naman, 'di ba? Yung approach na ginamit nila. Kasi, kapag gano'n naman yung approach natin, hindi natin na ma-maximize, 'di ba, yung working capital natin. At natatabi lang siya, nasasayang siya. So, yan. So, dito, sa hedging approach, ayan. So, these funds are matched and the nature of assets to be financed. And the long-term fund should be used to finance the fixed portion of current assets requirement in a manner similar to financing of fixed assets. And also, take a look at this one. Therefore, divide the requirement of total funds into permanent and seasonal components, each being financed by a different source. So, we have the fixed assets, the permanent current assets, the fluctuating current assets, short debt, and long-term debt, equity plus capital. So, here in the conservative approach class, this approach suggests that the estimate requirement of total funds should be met from long-term sources. So, use of short-term funds should be restricted only to emergency situations or when they're in unexpected of outflow of funds. So, yun na nga. They use also yung mga, yun nga, sabi ko sa mga emergency situation, no? Dun sa funds nila at naka-estimate talaga siya from the long-term resources. So, this is the graph for the conservative approach. So, we have also the aggressive approach. Wala. So, in aggressive approach class, if the firm decides to finance a part of the permanent working capital by short-term resources, the aggressive policy seeks to minimize excess liquidity while meeting the short-term requirements. So, there has been a trade-off between risk and profitability, and depends largely on the financial manager's attitude towards risk, yet while doing so, he must take care of the following factors. So, eto nga, dahil nga aggressive, no, naka-minimize yung liquidity ng kanilang asset. So, kailangan magaling yung naghahawak ng fund. So, nakadepende talaga to sa financial manager. So, ito yung mga kailangang exercise ng financial manager para enable for him to take care the following. So, flexibility of the mix, cost of financing, and risk attached with the financing mix. So, ano yung mga factors that we need to consider? So, the cost incurred on materials, wages, and overheads. length of time for which raw materials remain in the stores before they are issued to production. So, these are the, ang business finance kasi more on the managerial financing. So, ito yung mga, mga real life scenarios and factors na kailangan natin talagang bantayan as a controller. 'Di ba? So, kailangan nating bantayan yung cost for materials, wages, overhead, yung length of time na ginugugol for production, it's even measurable. And syempre, yung length of production ng work in progress, length of the sales cycle, and the average period of credit allowed to customers. So, more on inventory and accounts receivable here. So, next is the amount of cash required to pay day-to-day expense of the business, the amount of cash required for advance payment, if any, and the average period of credit to be allowed by suppliers, time lag in the payment of wages and the overhead. So, ito yung mga kailangan nating i-determine para sa ating working capital. Next is the pro forma working capital estimates. Ayan. So, pag sinabing pro forma, this is the sample of a statement of working capital. So, we have the cash, receivable, stocks, advance payment, creditors, log-in payments expense. So, gumagawa to ng ganito yung mga accountants for them to monitor the working capital. So, ito, trading, more on buy and sell. This one, mas mahaba yung kailangan nating statement of working capital requirements para sa isang manufacturing industry. So, we need to assess the work in progress for raw mats, direct labor and overheads, finished goods, sundry debtors, and payment in advance, and balance of cash, current liabilities, as well as the provision for margin contingencies. So, eto, nalagay ko lang siya dito. It's a study. So, this is the trends in working capital management and its impact on the firm's performance. So, analysis of Mauritian small manufacturing firm. So, ang purpose ng study na to is to investigate the impact of working capital management on corporate profitability of Mauritian small manufacturing firms and the trend in working capital needs and profitability of firms that are examined to identify the causes for any significant differences between the 5 major industries. So, ito, research methodology lang siya kung paano nila inobserve and pinag-aralan yung working capital management ng isang small-medium enterprise. So, yan. So, sa mga study, no, sa mga research, pwede kayong gumamit ng ratio. Yan, para pag-aralan yung isang study. So, ito yung ginawa nila, no? More on financial ratio and planning analysis lang din. So, if ever may gusto kayong patunayan or i-research na company, pwede kayong gumamit ng financial statement ratios. Yan. Ano lang siya, application sa pinag-aralan nating working capital management. So, as an accountant kasi in the future or as a financial manager, you need to assess and monitor the accounts that is being submitted by your accountants. Ayun, 'di ba? So, kayo kasi magde-decide if saan pa pwedeng mag-improve or ano pa yung mga control na pwede nating gawin, 'di ba, dito sa industry. So, in accounting, you just taught how to do a computation, but in business finance, it is about the management decisions, okay, and yung deep understanding on why you compute these numbers. 'Di ba? Why do we need to compute these financial statements, 'di ba? What's next after that? So, after that siguro kapag nakapag-work na kayo in the future, ayun, magiging mga financial managers kayo, financial controllers. Ayan. Mas maiintindihan nyo kung ano yung mga ways on how to improve the financial management practices of the company, on how you can recommend, 'di ba? The best amount, the best variance analysis, the best budget for that company. So, ito lang yung application nun, nung company na to. So, in summary class, ayan, working capital management is all about the relationship between the current assets and current liabilities of the company. So, that's all with our discussion. So, this is my last topic. So, we'll see you on our next session for our remaining topic. So, medyo namamadali na rin tayo kasi malapit na rin kayo mag-finals. And, you have your, your quiz. I'll be sending it tomorrow. Ayan. So, you will submit it. Ano bang calendar ngayon? Calendar. And you will submit it on May 29. So, it's about financial ratio analysis class. So, ang gagawin nyo lang doon is I will give a financial statement and you will compute for the financial ratio for each one. So, I'll be sending the financial statement tomorrow after this one. So, yun. And then, our next topic, no, na-cover na natin halos lahat eh. I will check yung mga next topic para makapagbasa din kayo. Our next topic is sources of short-term capital, capital budgeting, and mergers and acquisition. So, yun. And business remedies. Ito, more on lang naman to. Causes and remedies of the failures. So, yan. And we're done with our business finance. So, yun guys. I'll be sending the links din for your seatwork kasi in every video, you need to comment, okay, on what you have learned kasi it's part of your seatwork dahil hindi ko kayo maisa-isa kung ano yung natutunan nyo dahil limited time lang din tayo. So, yun. I'll be sending links of the recorded video, each one. So, you're required to comment as part of your seatworks. So, that's all class. Any question? Ayan. So, going once, going twice. Wala. So, thank you so much, class, for attending our session. And, I'll be sending na lang dun sa mga instructions sa ating monitors group chat. Tapos, relay nyo na lang dun sa inyong mga group chats. Okay? So, see you on our next meeting. Bye-bye!
Bye po, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Bye po, ma'am. Thank you po.
Thank you po, ma'am.
Thank you po.
Thank you po.